Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Danny Boyle and Alex Garland are back for 28 years later, but is that a good thing? Let's talk about it. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Movie Emporium, spoiler-filled discussion of the newest film, 28 Years Later. This is a film, once again, directed by Danny Boyle. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this will be a spoiler-filled discussion of 28 Years Later, but as a synopsis for this movie, 28 Years Later is a continuation of the 28 film franchise. Of course, this actually ignores 28 weeks later, it just talks about 28 days later. So basically, 28 Years Later takes place 28 years later after the infection. We have characters played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, who plays, of course, Jamie. We, of course, have Alfie Williams, who plays his son, Spike. And they live on this island that is basically kind of like a moat island. There's water all around it. They have one coastal way that they can get in, and they live a very Puritan life. Well, the son, Spike, is also dealing with a mother played by Jodie Comer, who has a mysterious illness, and he decides that he wants to go out and try and figure out to this doctor, who's played by Ray Fiennes, what exactly is wrong with his mother. Well, his father doesn't want that, and his father wants him to become a man, so they got hunting zombies or infected, and basically the kid takes his mom on the journey to go meet the doctor against his father's wishes. So therefore, it's a coming of age story about a young boy who defies the laws of this town to help his mother and try to save his mother, which is what a young kid would do in this scenario. So it's very much a realistic approach if there was a zombie or an infected apocalypse dealing with the rage virus. Well, they have to contend against alpha males, which are now in control of the infected characters. And it basically becomes a story about survival in the world that is ravaged by the infection and rage virus. So there you go. So 28 years later, reunites, of course, Danny Boyle with Alex Garland for a third film in this franchise. It's very interesting that they've ignored 28 weeks later because there is some value in that movie, but it seems like because they felt like they were deceived and they were taken away from that franchise because of what they were doing with Sunshine, that they were just very bitter about it, which I get. I mean, they started this franchise, they created like one of the great horror films of the last 25 years. And so with a movie like this, you can kind of understand that they want to just kind of revamp and kind of retool the franchise into a much more cohesive whole. So they're doing kind of like what David Gordon Green and Danny McBride did with the Halloween franchise. But I was hoping that with these two individuals coming back and then kind of, delving deeper into the lore of the 28 film franchise, the Rage virus, that they would create something kind of fun and energetic. I love the trailers for this movie. I love the Kipling poem that runs through the trailers, which is actually in the movie. And so, yeah, I mean, I was really looking forward to this. It was, of course, on my top 10 most anticipated of the year, so I was really looking forward to this movie. And so it is with my extreme excitement to talk about it that I truly love this movie. I think 28 Days Later has a small kind of edge on what this movie does, because I think there's just some of the stuff in this movie with like going back and showing us scenes of like the military from different ages is a little convoluted, a little weird. I think 28 Days Later was simple, more like visceral in a lot of respects, which I'm not saying this isn't visceral. I'm just saying that edges it out just a little bit. But this movie is fascinating. It's interesting. It takes our Alex Garland approach of like the world itself and how brutal it is and how violent it can be. And Danny Boyle's sense of like excitement when it comes to the visual flair and stuff like that. And we'll talk about like some of the camera stuff that they do in this movie. But I like the nature of like a father and a son just kind of going out in the wilderness, being attacked by infected, having to experience what it is like to become an adult in a lot of respects. The nature of how a world tries to rebuild, but also settle on the fact that they're quarantined off from the world. So what do they have to do? They have to like forge their own plans. They have to build their own society. They have to, it's basically like going back to the 1800s in a lot of respects. And that's what this movie does. And on top of that, you have this mysterious illness, which if you can kind of garner the pieces of what's happening, but you can kind of experience like where we're at with this world when it comes to like the medicines and doctors and what they say, what exactly is wrong with her. But the nice mystery is that fact that they don't know, they've been gone from the world for so long that they don't really have an answer for what's wrong with Jodie Comer's character. And so it becomes a really interesting story about a son just trying to protect his mother, trying to figure out his mother, trying to save his mother, and how scared his father truly is. I mean, his father's not a bad man. He's just protecting his son from the horrors of the world and trying to make him understand that there is some truly evil stuff out there and you have to protect yourself at all angles or you will die in the process. So it's not like Aaron Taylor Johnson's character Jamie is bad. It's just he doesn't understand sometimes that there's more to this situation than what he's like afraid. He's like not willing to go beyond his kind of measured area of like life. And so therefore his son just takes, different steps and goes beyond what his father tells him to do, which is he takes his mother out to meet the doctor, played of course by Ralph Fiennes. And yeah, it's a really interesting movie. It's a really gross movie in a lot of respects, but I expect nothing less from this type of franchise. It's a very visceral, very unflinching look at a world that has fallen apart. And I just love the idea of what this movie's doing. We'll talk about some of the spoilers in a second, but I like the fact that this movie has some interesting ideas. It doesn't always work on the ideas, and the simple fact that it's like you have to kind of leap beyond the logical reasoning sometimes. But the human nature of what Alex Garland has proposed here, how Danny Boyle has filmed it and justified it, really works. I think Alfie Williams is a revelation. He hasn't really done much, and I think he's fantastic as young Spike. I think it's one of those characters, one of those young kid portrayals that is really difficult because he's like, you could say Aaron Taylor Johnson or Jodie Comer is the main actor in this movie, but Alfie Williams is the center point because if you watch the end of this movie, he is the center point of where the story is going to go forward. But he is a really interesting character with a lot of human emotion, and what I think Alex Garland has written for him is really fascinating. I think that's one of Alex Garland's strengths, is writing characters in a much depth performance and a much more deep persona than what we're given when it comes to characters. And I think he's really good at that. You look at like Warfare that came out this year and kind of researching into the depths of characters themselves. It really is kind of a strength to what Alex Garland can do. And Danny Boyle has always been good at working with young actors and kind of getting authentic portrayals out of them. So the nature of Spike himself, the nature of Alfie Williams' character is really deep and really kind of, there is a lot of emotionality to it, which I thought was great. And I think Jodie Comer, who has this mysterious illness, who is constantly back and forth between not remembering where she is to remember where she is, the nature of like just the whatever's happening to her is causing her to just lose all sanity and lose all reality. I think Jodie Comer does a fantastic job here. Is really interesting to watch. Watching her and Alfie Williams work together is really, really great, to be fairly honest. I think they feel like a real good mother and son combo. I think Aaron Taylor Johnson does a really fantastic job as the father, who is just kind of torn between like trying to take care of his son, but also dealing with the fact of his wife being sick, his betrayal of his wife by like cheating on her, and just the nature of like, what are you doing? How do you handle yourself when you're dealing with a scenario where you can't help your wife, your son is, becoming an adult? Like, how does that affect you? And I thought that was a really interesting idea. And then you have Ralph Fiennes, who plays this doctor who has a really interesting story to him and what he's doing and how he's honoring the dead and how he's honoring his portrayal of everything. And I really love Ralph Fiennes. I think Ralph Fiennes is like one of the great actors working, period. He's up there with Daniel Day-Lewis, but I think that's a really remarkable performance. But how headstrong he is, but also how calm he is, how, authentic he is when he comes to like, treating the kid like an adult, but also treating the kid like, yeah, you're going to, you may lose your mother, and, feels very like a grandfatherly type of performance. And I really love what Ralph Fiennes is doing here. And he has a great look to him too, because he's covered in iodine and stuff like that. And it's also some really good stuff with the camera work. They use like 25 iPhone cameras in front of one individual, like let's say infected, and the way it shoots and the way it moves, it's like a really cool effect. Like it'll get shot with an arrow and then it'll like shift real quickly because it has all those cameras in front of it, all those iPhones in front of it, which is really interesting because I have the exact camera or exact phone right here that they use in the movie, which is a 15 plus iPhone. And it really is cool because it's just, you haven't seen anything like that before. It's a really interesting technique that really is like, you could do it in like, I don't know, a computer, but they have all those cameras filming, and you can use the angles in different ways, in really fascinating ways, where it shifts really quickly. It's pretty cool. But I like the fact that this movie is shot really lo-fi, and it looks, it looks grainy, and it looks like it's an evolution of what they did in the first movie, and of course the second movie. But there is a level of just like, you feel like you're with the characters, you feel like you're part of this grainy, crimey world of disgustingness. You know, all the infected are all like, you know, ravaged by time and stuff like that. And they're led by this alpha character, which is really interesting. But yeah, I mean, overall, just kind of then there before we get into spoilers, I just really love this movie. I think it's really fascinating. I think it goes into really deep and unsettling, but really kind of cathartic places, especially for the kid. And I think it does a really nice job. So overall, it's a really fantastic movie. I think it's really great. I think it's a movie like one of the best of the year, to be fairly honest. So that's kind of where I roll when it comes to my review of this movie. And like I said, it's really fascinating. We'll talk about spoilers here now. So if you don't want to hear about spoilers, or if you watch this, or if you haven't watched the movie, definitely wait. But yeah, let's talk about spoilers. So at the beginning of this movie, we're introduced to a family, and we're introduced to Jimmy, who is a young kid at the time. The infected have basically stormed his house, killed his mother and their family and the kids, and he runs off to his father, who is in a church, who's a father of the Holy Land or whatever, and he basically allows the infected to kill him, turning him into an infected himself. And what's really cool is you're made to think that Aaron Taylor-Johnson's character is Jimmy, but as we learn later on, it's not. Well, I mean, that's kind of like, I like the idea of like, here's a prologue to what happens from a different point of view. Each movie's had a different point of view on the 28 days later scenario, where we see like the violence happen, and we see the infected happen, and we see the rage start popping out of people. But the crux of this movie, of course, takes place 28 years later, like I was talking about, with the nature of the family and the group that are on this island and stuff like that. And what I really love about this movie, and what I really love what it's trying to do, is, you know, the character played by Jodie Comer is really sick. She's really, you know, she's on her deathbed. There's nobody can figure out what's wrong with her. And I love the nature of like how that plays out, how this kid is like really, you know, he wants to protect his mother, but his father just doesn't seem like he's very distant. He doesn't feel like he's really with her. And it really shows like after the night of partying, when they come back from the hunt, which is to help kind of make the Spike character a man, how he just kind of jumps on the bed after he's cheated on his wife like nothing had happened. And the nature of like Spike having to see his father, which is really important, having sex with the woman in the village, is a really kind of a strength of what this movie is doing, because you have to get a character. The thing about plotting when it comes to storyline is you can't just have the character just hate his father for no reason. He has to be kind of despicable in a lot of respects, whether it be cheating. You know, you understand from the point of view of the father, and the simple fact that he's at his wit's ends. He is struggling as a father with his kid. Yes, he takes him out to kill the infected, because we see with the really disturbing looking, gross kind of, I would say, Last of Us level of zombie or whatever, where there's on the ground and there's like a whole family of them, and they're just kind of like, you know, eating worms, and they're disgusting looking. I love the disgusting nature of this movie. But they go out and they're very successful, and they're attacked by the infected, and the alpha, as we learn, is this like super zombie or super infected that actually has a mind of its own. It rips out things in their spines or whatever. It's pretty gross, but yeah, I just love the fact that like Spike's character is given motivation, and really given authentic motivation to why he needs to take his mom, who's clearly dying, to this doctor that his father is clearly not wanting him to go to, because they saw an incident back in their day that they don't totally understand. So it's about the misunderstanding of like what this doctor could do. And so he goes on an adventure, and it's a really cool kind of like, you know, adventure with him and his mom, and just like how his mom is struggling and dealing with like real humanistic approaches. And I really appreciate that. And then they come across a soldier, Eric, who's from Sweden, and his whole platoon got stranded on this beach in the UK, and he's like the only one left because he's been attacked by the infected. And you know, he is cocky and, you know, self-assured, but then he gets killed by the alpha, which is really a kind of a gruesome moment, because he tears out his spine and his head and stuff like that. And it's really cool stuff, but it really shows that this movie is willing to be unflinching when it comes to the chaotic and gross nature. But then it turns into, we have a situation which is probably one of the most unsettling moments of the movie, but also one of the most potent, because the idea of birth in this world is really dangerous, and really, you don't know what could happen. And then we find this infected woman who is pregnant and is giving birth, and the Jodie Comer character actually calms down the infected woman as she's giving birth, and she gives birth to a human baby that is actually normal. Like, that is interesting concepts, whether it spans out to be something like really unique to the movies, because they were playing on 3 movies in this 28 years later series. I mean, who knows? But the fact that the baby's fine shows that this world is unpredictable. This world is unique and exciting, and nobody knows what's happening. And the fact that this baby was born into an infected and is fine is really interesting. On top of that, how's the baby gonna eat? So there's got to be some justification there, but it really is interesting. And then when the doctor, played by Ralph Fiennes, comes in and explains about the alpha male and how the alpha male works and how he's able to control it through the the darts and stuff like that, it's really kind of a cool thing. And that's when we see the boneyard. And we see the Ray Fiennes character takes the head of Eric's character and actually throws it in a fire. We get the skull, and we see this like really cool. It's in the poster, but it's a really cool bone skull like mountain. I think that's what the Bone Temple, which is the second movie, is kind of referring to. But it's just a really cool aesthetic, a really cool kind of composition of like ideas. And it's a really cool feel to the movie. But I love the simple nature of what this third act does, where it basically shows that this kid has to kind of go off on his own, and that his mother, as much as he wants to save her, there's nothing he can do, because cancer, as we learned that she has, is a bitch. And if you have no ways of like trying to cure the situation, like we tend to not want to have in this world, there's not much you could do about it. And the kid has to, this is the big part of the kid growing up, is the kid has to let his mother go, and he doesn't want it. He actually is given the baby, and then Ray Fiennes has to basically kill Jodie Comer's character. It's really sad. It really is. It's really heartbreaking. I think the moment when Ray Fiennes gives Spike the skull of his mother and he puts it at the very top is, as weird and kind of disturbing as it is, it's very potent. It's very what this movie is doing, which is this world is unjustified in what it tries to do, but it doesn't care about you, or doesn't care about your mother, or doesn't care about anything. It's going to do what it wants to do, and like there's nothing you can do about it. You have to find a way through. And I love the calming nature of the Ray Fiennes character, and it's a very much an Oscar nominated performance coming from an Oscar nominated actor, but it really is visceral and authentic and heartbreaking to watch. And you watch him, like the visuals that they show with Spike, as he's because he was hit with one of those arrows that kind of calms him down. It's like a drug or whatever. And then he goes off and he gives the baby to the town and goes off on his own. And Ray Fiennes is like, the baby needs to be protected, and it's what happens. And that's a really kind of interesting thing. That's when the kid's growing up, and when he's gonna have to go on his own and be safe. But this world is very dark and disturbing. And when the kid is attacked by a huge amount of infected, Danny Boyle has to throw in his Cockney British group of gangsters, and that's when we are introduced to Jack O'Connell and his group of individuals, and that is when we're reintroduced to Jimmy, who we find out is a part of this group called the Jimmies. And it's a really cool, fun scene. It's really like just a over the top, silly, battle of zombie murder. And, the two, Jimmy and Spike, basically form an uneasy alliance, because, Jimmy's probably not a good character. And, of course, Jamie, the Aaron Taylor Johnson character, is probably going to go after his son. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, 28 years later, The Bone Temple will come out in January, directed by Nia DaCosta. But if we didn't know there was a sequel coming out, I think this is a really interesting way to end the movie. It leads into so many ideas of what could happen. But yeah, I mean, besides the fact of like the camera work and how cool that is, and then like the birth of the infected baby, and just the nature of like the cancer situation and the Bone Temple, and like the nature of Ray Fiennes, who is just trying to honor the dead in a lot of respects. I think this movie is just fascinating. I really do. It's hard to watch. It can put off a lot of people, but I think if you've watched both movies and you like both movies, I think this will hit just as hard for you as at least 28 Days Later did. And I think it's a wild movie. It really is, but it's a very authentically interesting approach to the series. So overall, 28 Years Later is fantastic. Once again, I think 28 Days Later is a little bit better, but I think this one is still it's great. It really is. If I had to score it, I give it a 9.5 out of 10 just for that reason. So with that said, that's going to be my take and my spoiler take of 28 Years Later, now in theaters. So anyways, thank you so much for watching my review. I appreciate it. Comments below, what did you think of this movie? What do you think overall of like the ideas of what's being presented? I would like to know. But yeah, there you go. So anyways, thank you so much. If you like what you see on this channel, hit the subscribe button, the Join Movie Emporium, hit that notification bell, top to find what's coming next. If you like this video, awesome, hit that like button. And as always, we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out, guys.